Chapter 1 of video game design, we are talking about gameplay. We know nothing can kill a game more quickly and more completely as poor gameplay, and no matter what, nothing can save poor gameplay. So gameplay is the key component to video games. Elements of gameplay. A game must be, above all, it must be engaging, something your players will enjoy. A game must also have clean and easy to learn controls. Bad controls can also ruin a game. The controls must work well with your target device. So if your target device is a computer, you want to make sure your controls work with the computer. So you probably would go with a mouse and keyboard. If your target device is a smartphone, you want to make sure your controls work well with the touchscreen. And a game must also be accessible to a broad user base. So when creating the game, you want to consider your target audience, not just yourself. You don't want to create the game that's catered to your strengths and weaknesses. You want to touch on a broad user base. And we have two terms at the bottom, win condition and modifiers. Win condition being the rule that allow players to win and reap the rewards for their hard work. That's the victory condition. And modifiers are what are put in a player's way by the developer, which will be all of you, to make it harder to reach the win condition. It's easy to make a game no one beats, but it's harder to make a game that almost defeats all the players. And that's kind of what our goal is going to be with GameSalad. Genre and styles. Genre is a broad category of a game. Could be an action game, strategy game, adventure game, a simulation game, whereas style refers to the specifics of the gameplay itself. It sets the player's expectation with regards to the game's rules. So, for an example, for a platform game, okay, a player expects platformers to focus on elements such as timing, puzzles, running, jumping over obstacles, etc. Okay, so the style kind of sets the player's expectations with how the game is going to be delivered. Each genre, and there's plenty as you can see, can have different gameplay styles. And we're going to take a further look into the different genres and gameplay styles. Here is a chart showing the different genres on your left and the different gameplay styles on your right. As you can see with this action genre, and action games can have a bunch of different gameplay styles, and we can see we're going to focus on 5 today. Action games, they're all about action within the game, so such as big loud explosions and say gunfire, and action taken by the player. So example, button pressing. So there's 2 types of actions in the game and by the person who's playing the game. It incorporates motion, timing, and events. They're usually shorter play times. So top off my head, one that I can think of is Call of Duty, where it's very short playing times, but there's a lot of action going on in the game and a lot of action being taken by the player. This we are going to focus on in class. This goes in further deeper with GameSalad. Continuing on with the action genre, now we're going to dive deeper into the different styles. Okay, first one being paddleball games. The key to paddleball games is timing. Okay, the speed of the ball must keep the game challenging. Okay, primary gameplay mechanics in paddleball is the physics of the ball, the paddle, and the block. We all played this paddleball type of arcade game, maybe on the computers when computers were first released. A key to this game is timing. If the physics aren't fun to work with, your players will just quit the game. All right, it has to be kind of fun to work with and also fair and realistic. Another style is run and gun. Run and gun games are all about close combat and quick reflexes, okay, very similar to Call of Duty. They include a big bad boss, which the focus is to mow down all the enemies and to reach the boss. Kind of think of Sonic in a way, or either a better example than Sonic would be Mario. You get through all the enemies in the land, and then you end up fighting the boss on the top of the hill, if you remember the N64 version. Um, the bosses often combine skill sets and weapons of the smaller enemies, so they kind of, he or she, whoever the boss is, has all the different skill sets and weapons that you've been dealing with. You also, with run and gun, include waves of enemies, which ramp up the level of difficulty with the enemies, also the number of enemies. So maybe the first wave might be 2, the next wave might be 4, the next wave might be 6, and they have a better gun, for example. And this also introduced a new classes of enemies as players progress. All right, as I just noted, as you get further down, you have newer enemies that you're introduced to. This is what keeps these games fun, is all the new enemies that you run into and different weapons that they may have and the difficulty. And run and gun has RPG elements, all right, or what's called as role-playing games. This adding new weapons in the form of pickups or power-ups. Okay, so adding new weapons, adding new enemies, the number of enemies, and also different types of enemies as well. There's also styles hack and slash, which is very similar to run and gun, but hack and slash emphasizes on close combat and quick reflexes, as I noted, just like and very similar to run and gun. The goal is to develop your character. Well, the goal for, I should say, run and gun is to develop your character. Okay, but for hack and slash, developing your character is not the goal. Okay, goals include room clearing and collecting, with an emphasis on being able to defeat the end game. Okay, end game being some sort of boss or a puzzle of some kind, and what run and gun doesn't have, whereas hack and slash includes this collection aspect of it, in which to defeat the level, okay, it may depend on you collecting enough items throughout so the player lives through the final encounter. Okay, this collection aspect isn't included in run and gun. Think of Sonic, you have to collect so many coins with Sonic, so then when you have the fight with the boss at the end, you have enough life to make it through. So the collection aspect with Sonic is very important. There's also the platform style, which we noted. Okay, platformers are all about timing. Okay, think of the games you play on your smartphone. A lot of them, think Flappy Bird is a platformer game that is all about timing. Some examples I put, such as needing to dodge a bullet, trying to jump across a pit of snakes, etc. Platformer styles have tile-based levels, and if you look at the bottom, I have an example. They're often built on a grid to keep consistent distances between obstacles and platforms, so this doesn't have impassable areas. Okay, kind of easier to create and be consistent, as you can see on the left-hand side. Kind of this blocky level you see on the right. And then last style we'll talk about is the physics style. Physics games rely on the physics built into the game, okay, kind of goes with the name of the style, or tool to handle any action animation on the part of the game objects. With GameSalad, okay, it saves what would be you, the developer, sometimes in creating animations, okay, and we're going to show how to complete animations a little farther on into the marketing period. Physics games may seem easier to build, but it requires a lot more thought. Okay, the physics you kind of have to, takes a little while to get down. But we will work on that in class. This tutorial will complete in class as well. We'll go over these terms. And one more style that I kind of cut myself early is the fighting style. Fighting styles, they can be more frustrating. If you think of Super Smash Brothers, which is a fighting style, it can be more frustrating because moves become more complex over time, with single key attacks getting superseded by more complicated patterns. So they're simple buttons for the most part, but to complete better moves or better attacks, these single key attacks are kind of superseded and by all these complicated patterns that you have to do if you think Mortal Kombat to create a certain move or punch, etc. These include what's called ramping up, in which moves tend to be more complex over time as you continue fighting along. The fun with fighting games comes at the intersection of complexity of the controls and how the game reacts. So the game doesn't react when you hit a certain button and say the punch or the hit lags, okay? It's going to take the fun away from the game. Learning the controls is fun, all right, but if they're too complex, it could kind of not want the player to play. They feel like they cannot complete what's asked them so they can make a certain move. Or example, if you think of the finish thems in Mortal Kombat. These games also allow for a button masher, which is for your novice players where to get used to the basic controls, they'll just kind of smash their buttons along and just a frantic button pushes. Strategy, okay. There are strategy games, which encompass a narrower category than action games. Right? They're very specific, but these are more your simulation games that predicts the rise and falls of empires. Sims, an example, in NBA 2K, if you play the association where you can change the prices of tickets, or I should say the GM mode where you change the prices of tickets and the prices of the food and parking, that is a very realistic simulation, okay? And which strategy games gives the players choice, which there are multiple solutions and multiple options. These are important elements to gameplay, all right, when you're making a strategy type game. All right, we'll get into this in class, goals versus content. And last one, we see mixing genres, okay, called mashups and hybrids, which these are games that mix controls or conditions across two or more genres. So you're kind of mixing two genres. You're mixing a action genre that we have been mentioning and also an adventure genre, or mixing a strategy and simulation genres together. So a lot of more game developers are experimenting with this kind of hybrid gameplay, combining two main genres. The end of chapter 1 for video game design. We'll go over the tutorials in class and see you all later.